within the next half an hour, actually at 6 o'clock, Jeremy Corbyn's going to come face to face with the new lineup of Labour MPs in the Parliamentary Labour Party. It's expected that he'll face calls to apologise again for the party's heavy defeat in the general election. Joining us now is Stephen Kinnock, who was re-elected as a Labour MP for Aberavon in Wales. Stephen, hello, welcome to the programme.
Hello, good evening. Lots
to talk about. Presumably you're going to this meeting at 6, are you?
Yes, I'll be there at 6 o'clock, yeah.
For the benefit of the listeners, and I won't ask you to do it, but I'm going to paraphrase some of the things you've said over the weekend since the election result. You've talked about Corbynism being finished, the leadership being weak and incompetent, Labour have alienated Leave voters, the manifesto was a Christmas wish list, the whole business was repellent, we've repelled our core voters and it was a disaster, which is all adds up to the word ouch, really. You've given Jeremy Corbyn a bit of a kicking.
Look, I think we've got to have a proper, honest debate in the party. You know, we need to reconcile ourselves to the reality of where we are, but you can't have reconciliation until you have the truth. So we do need to tell the truth. We need to be absolutely clear about where we failed in the general election campaign, what the problems were. Also a massive issue around our position on Brexit. I think the decision to back a second referendum was disastrous and it alienated millions of people in our Leave voting areas.
A couple of points then. It's interesting to me. I've been dying to ask you this actually since the result. So I'm glad I'm talking to you. What would you have done in that scenario going into the election when, you had a lot of Leave voters and a lot of Remain voters? Jeremy Corbyn chose to sit on the fence. What would you have done?
I would have stuck to our guns, what we set out in our 2017 manifesto, which was that we would respect the referendum result, but get a deal that protected jobs and livelihoods. And I think that was the right position because it would have enabled us to get potentially a soft Brexit followed by a general election campaign where we had a real serious shot at winning and having a Labour government. Instead, we've got a Tory government and probably a hard Brexit. And I think that was obviously not anything like what we could have got if we'd been prepared to compromise.
A soft Brexit, though, sounds like a compromise. Those Labour leavers who voted Conservative didn't necessarily want a soft Brexit, and yet you wouldn't have allayed the fears of the Remainers in the big metropolitan areas.
Well, I think, we've lost because our red wall collapsed, and our red wall was almost exclusively in Leave voting areas. So it's a pretty simple case of electoral maths. If you have a position which alienates millions of people in seats that you absolutely have to hold, then you're going to lose the general election and hand the victory to Boris Johnson on a silver platter.
But they wouldn't necessarily have wanted, for example, presumably when you say a soft Brexit, you mean perhaps a relationship with the single market, which could have led to freedom of movement. That wouldn't have played with the Leave voters, would it?
Well, my experience on the doorstep is that people wanted their vote to be respected, and what they meant by that was leaving the European Union. I had very few people expressing a strong view about the form of Brexit, and back in April of this year, we proposed a Common Market 2.0, which was all about keeping single market alignment, having frictionless trade, but leaving the political project of the European Union. And I think, when we were just in the common market, it was actually very popular with the British people. It was only after the Maastricht Treaty and the European Union started to take on a much more political dimension with things like the euro and free movement of labour that the paths of the United Kingdom and Europe began to diverge. Okay. So I think that's a vitally important point also to recall now with the Prime Minister putting forward this legislation that we're not going to extend the transition period. Well, if he wants an oven-ready deal, there is an oven-ready deal right there. It's called Common Market 2.0.
I guess to a certain extent we're rerunning old arguments here, and the fundamental question is how long it will take those Labour voters who feel betrayed to forgive your party, which brings the next question of how much Jeremy Corbyn was an issue and how much the manifesto was an issue. And I mentioned the manifesto because yesterday I interviewed Nadia Whittome, who's the youngest Labour MP. She's been elected for Nottingham East at 23. And she absolutely to the hilt defended that manifesto and felt that was the way to go into the next elections, which is going to make this meeting of the PLP very interesting, isn't it? So who's arrayed on what side and how much blood will end up on the carpet, do you think?
We had a lot of very good policies in the manifesto, individual policies, but the problem was when you added it all together, nobody really trusted it, believed in it, and it felt like we were just sort of having a Christmas wish list. So I think the general view has to be based on the election result. Leaders are judged by their results, manifestos are judged by their results. We've just had the worst general election result since 1935. I think that speaks for itself.
Just a final thought on who might step into Jeremy Corbyn's shoes. There was a poll on Labour List, the website, this morning. Rebecca Long-Bailey's topping the poll to be leader, very much of the Corbyn ilk. She got 14.4% of the vote, and she's, hopefully, I think she is, joining together with Angela Rayner on a joint ticket of leader, deputy leader, and Angela Rayner came third with 13.5%. If someone is elected in Jeremy Corbyn's in the ilk of Jeremy Corbyn, is that damaging for your party, do you think, in the long term?
I have to see what each of the candidates are going to say and to set out their stall. But what I would say is the very clear message from the electorate on Thursday was that Labour needs to turn the page. Labour needs to have a radical change of direction and recognise that we need, realistic policies, a patriotic Labour Party, a Labour Party that has clearly understood the failures of the last 4 years and is ready to move forward based on a fundamental change of direction.
Do you buy in that it has to be a northerner to appease the red wall?
I don't think it's so much what accent you have, it's what you say. And you need to be recognising that for years now, Labour's been drifting away from its working class heartlands. And by having that position on a second referendum, you were sending a clear message to those heartlands, which was, we're not listening to you and we're not respecting what you're telling us. So we need a candidate and we need a Labour leader whose starting point is that we start respecting and listening to those voters.
All right, Stephen Kinnock, thank you. Thanks for your time today. Thanks for talking to us. Stephen Kinnock, the MP for Aberavon.